Today I have 6 wide receivers that I am much, much higher on than consensus ADP right now, and I think one of them could end up being an absolute league winner, much like JSN last year. Let's go ahead and get to it, and we're gonna start with the first one, and that is going to be the guy that we were talking about, and that is Chris Olave, currently wide receiver 13 or 31st overall. Now, last season, he had his best season as a pro, 16.8 fantasy points per game, was the wide receiver 7, saw a 29% target share, nearly 10 targets per game last year. He was first in deep targets, also 13th in red zone targets. And he also had the eighth highest first read target share. Now, last season was a little bit of a roller coaster ride for him because they started the year with Spencer Rattler and then they turned things over to Tyler Shook. Now, once Tyler Shook took over from weeks 10 through 17, Chris Olave was actually the wide receiver 3, averaging 20.1 PPR points per game. Now, this season, the Saints are expected to be one of the most fast paced offenses and should be top 10 in pass attempts per game this year. Now, they did go out and draft Jordan Tyson. Now, he was somebody that I was really liking as kind of a, wide receiver 3/4, but he just suffered another soft tissue injury and could miss significant time. So I think the door is absolutely open for Chris Olave to absolutely smash his current ADP. I have him as my wide receiver 7. I don't know why he's going at wide receiver 13 right now. It doesn't make a lot of sense. This team also has one of the easiest schedules in the league, as well as for wide receivers, have the third easiest schedule. So I think Chris Olave is being grossly underpriced right now. It's somebody that I'm definitely excited about if I can get him in the third round. Let's keep moving here. Let's move over to another wide receiver that's going a little bit after him, and that is Rashee Rice, wide receiver 11 right now. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Rashee Rice this offseason and what his fantasy value should look like. The argument against him has been availability and suspensions. Well, we got word this past week that the league is not going to suspend Rashee Rice after spending a month in jail for violating his parole. He did get a knee cleanup back in May, but he's been mostly full go during training camp and is expected to be ready to roll once week 1 gets here. Now, ignoring the off-field injury stuff, Rashee Rice has been one of the best wide receivers in the league when he's been on the field. Last season in 8 games, he averaged nearly 19 PPR points per game. He did this while averaging nearly 10 targets per game and a 29% target share. Now, over his last 17 healthy games, Rice has caught 120 passes, 1,300 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns, which should be good for 18.6 PPR points per game, which would have been good for wide receiver 5 last year. Now, I get it. The injury stuff is a concern. Some of it is a little bit fluky, right? The first time he got hurt, that was Patrick Mahomes diving into his knee. Now, last season was mainly from the suspension. He missed the first 6 weeks of the season. And then after that, in week 15, he suffered a concussion. They just held him out the rest of the year. That was the only injury. Now, this offseason, he had a knee cleanup for that injury that he had. And that is something that plenty of players that go through every offseason. So it's not something I'm really all that concerned about with Rashee Rice. When he is on the field, he is the target hog for this offense. And I don't really understand the people that are pushing back on him. I've seen people that have him as like a wide receiver 3. That is absolutely blasphemous. I understand the stuff with Patrick Mahomes. People concerned about him. Patrick Mahomes is way ahead of schedule. He is a lock to start week 1. And I actually think that he's another guy that we could talk about. That was just the video for that. But Patrick Mahomes right now is going like the 9th or 10th round. I think everybody's expecting this team to be very run heavy this year. I don't buy it. Andy Reid has never been that way in his entire career. He cannot help himself but to throw the ball. And so I think this team is still going to rank inside the top 10 this year in pass attempts. I really like Rashee Rice. He is the clear alpha wide receiver, and he is right now a streaming value that also is going in the 3rd round. So let's keep moving here. Let's move over to another wide receiver. Now, this is a wide receiver that has been mostly a wide receiver 2 in his career, but they traded away A.J. Brown, and we are talking about Devonta Smith. The Slim Reaper has always been a solid wide receiver 2 through his first 5 seasons in the league. Now, like we said, A.J. Brown was traded this offseason. A.J. Brown last year received a 29% target share or 121 targets overall, which are obviously now vacated. Now, Smith's per game projection with A.J. Brown off the field spikes significantly. Now, he did a 17-game projection through those times. It's roughly 98 catches, 1,200 receiving yards, and a heightened target share of nearly 38% without A.J. Brown on the field. So do I think he's going to see a 30% target share? Absolutely not. They went out and drafted Mekhi Lemon. He is going to be involved. This offense is still going to probably be run first. But the thing I think you can really look at is Kevin Patullo is out as offensive coordinator. Thank goodness. That dude was absolutely horrendous. And they bring in Sean Mannion and now takes over as the offensive coordinator. Like I said, they drafted Mekhi Lemon in the 1st round. They also signed Octavian Wicks. But Smith figures to dominate this team in targets. It should push for 130 to 140 targets. And I think it feels a little bit like a steal at the end of the 3rd round or wide receiver 14 right now for Devonta Smith. So again, another wide receiver that I really like that you can get in the third round. If someone like Olave or Rashee Rice are off the board, I am pivoting to Devonta Smith. Now, another wide receiver that is currently going in the fourth round, wide receiver 21, is Jaylen Waddle. Now, he was traded to Denver over this offseason. This is a terrific landing spot. He goes from a low pace, run heavy offense to one of the most pass heavy. Last season, the Broncos were top 5 in pass plays per game and ran the fourth most plays. Meanwhile, the Dolphins ranked 29th in pass plays per game and averaged the lowest amount of plays per game. Now, last year, he was efficient, 10th in yards per route run, 20th in yards per team pass temp last year for Jaylen Waddle. And Bo Nix is a significant upgrade over the quarterbacks that he's had in Miami. The question here is, can he be the leading target getter for this team? And I think the answer to that is simply yes. Sutton turns 31 this season. Waddle performed better in every efficiency metric last season than Courtland Sutton did, including yards per route run, PFF receiving grade, and targets per route run rate last year. At cost, I think Waddle's a strong option as someone who has wide receiver 1 upside, but costs significantly less than that right now. So Jaylen Waddle's another wide receiver that I am well ahead of consensus on. Next up is going to be Jameson Williams going at wide receiver 26 in the 5th round. Now, Williams is one of the most explosive and dynamic wide receivers in the league. Last season, he finished with 65 catches, 1,100 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. Now, among qualifying wide receivers, he ranked 10th in yards after a catch, 5th in yards per target, and 26th in yards per route run. The last few seasons, he has been a bit boom or bust. Last year, for example, he had 7 weeks of wide receiver 1 scoring, 4 weeks of wide receiver 3 scoring, but then he also had 7 weeks where he was unstartable. And now, so I get that, but I do think there is a path for him to go from volatile to consistent fantasy wide receiver. And I think he could finish as a high-end wide receiver 2 or a low-end wide receiver 1 if everything goes right. And I think he's going to be utilized differently now that new offensive coordinator Drew Petzing, and he has recently spoke about this, using him on far more short intermediate routes, getting the ball in his hands, letting him go to work, and utilizing that athleticism, that yards after the catch ability that he brings to the table. Very much before this, he was very much utilized as a deep threat. And I think that is what's really held him back and made him much more volatile of a wide receiver. Now, don't get me wrong. Amon-Ra St. Brown is still going to be the target hog in this offense. And then Jahmyr Gibbs is still going to get his. But the thing that I think that really could push him over the edge this year is I think this Lions secondary is going to be atrocious. I think this defense is going to really struggle this year. And I think that is going to open the door for the Lions to have to score a ton of points every single game. And if that is the case, and this offense becomes more fast-paced and even more pass-heavy than what they have been, I think that is where things take off for Jameson Williams. And so I think we see a shift here with how he's been utilized and getting the ball in his hands on a much more short, intermediate stuff, crossers, things like that. And I think that he really kind of stabilizes a little bit and becomes far more consistent across the board. So Jameson Williams is somebody that I'm loving right now at the back half of the 5th, early 6th rounds of my fantasy draft. Something you can have as your wide receiver 3. Now, next up, I'm going to talk about a wide receiver that I've kind of been on for a while. I'm going to talk about him again. He's not exciting. He's not sexy. He's not flashy. And that's Michael Pittman, wide receiver 42. Now, last year through the first 12 weeks of the season in 2025, Pittman was the wide receiver 11 in PPR formats, averaging 14.6 PPR points per game. Now, once Daniel Jones went down, the offense absolutely cratered. He finishes the wide receiver 53 over the final 6 games of the season, averaging to 6.5 PPR points per game. But the entire offense, the entire team just absolutely collapsed after Daniel Jones went down. Now, we don't have to worry about Daniel Jones this year because he was traded to Pittsburgh, and now you get Aaron Rodgers, and I think he is an absolute perfect fit for what Aaron Rodgers does. Rodgers last year had a 6.7 yards per attempt, ranked 29th. Rodgers is not the quarterback that he once was. He no longer possesses the ability to escape the pocket and create things with his legs. Now, at 42 years old, the goal is to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible. And he had demonstrated that his 2.59 second time to throw rate, which ranked second highest among all quarterbacks behind just Jared Goff. Now, this suits Michael Pittman, and I would expect for him to get peppered with targets. Rodgers also had the 9th most red zone pass attempts last year. Now, despite DK Metcalf, who was an absolute monster at 6'3", 220 pounds, he only received a 20% target share inside the red zone, while Pittman actually ranked top 12 in red zone targets last year. So I think Pittman could also really benefit from that as well. So I really like Michael Pittman. I think he is a value. No, I don't think that he's going to be like some wide receiver one, but at the very least, I think Michael Pittman could be somebody that is a consistent option that you are drafting for most places as like a wide receiver four, maybe even a wide receiver five, depending on how early you're drafting your wide receivers. But I think he can vastly outperform that. I think he finished like a low end wide receiver two. Michael Pittman, absolutely love him in PPR formats. I want to hit really quickly on three rookie wide receivers that I think we should really be paying attention to. One, and first up, is Deshaun Stribling, wide receiver 58, 132nd overall. And I'm going to say second round pick for the 49ers. I know a lot of people kind of scoffed at whenever they took him there. A lot of people felt like they overdrafted him. But, it came out afterwards that there was a lot of people in the NFL that had him much higher than I think what the internet had him going. And so, but he is a 6'2", 207-pound wide receiver, 4.36 speed. Now, listen, the 49ers are absolutely one. They are geriatric. They are AARP club. And we also already lost Ricky Pearsall, who was the really young wide receiver they had. They signed 33-year-old Mike Evans, George Kittle, who also turns 33 this year, is coming off a torn Achilles. They signed 30-year-old Deebo Samuel. And so there is a definite path here for Stribling to not just get opportunities right out of the gate, but also to really carve out a big role throughout the season, because this is a team that is just one injury away from really a lot of opportunities opening up for Stribling. And he really looked really good in his opening preseason game. Yes, I get it's preseason, but I think there's a lot to like here with Stribling. Wide receiver 58, though, makes it very easy to get your hands on him. Somebody that I would definitely be looking to take some shots on. Listen, in this part of the draft, when we're talking about double-digit rounds of your fantasy drafts, we're looking to hit home runs here. I don't care about trying to hit a single in these rounds. I am trying to hit home runs, players that can really put me over the top. And I think Stribling is one of those guys. Next up is going to be Casey Concepcion. Now, he was a Browns first-round pick this year, 6 foot, 196 pounds. He has the talent to be the Browns' number one wide receiver. I understand the hesitancy to draft any Browns player, not named Harold Fannin or Quinshon Judkins to this point. But I think he definitely has the talent to smash his current ADP of wide receiver 50, 124th overall. Concepcion is a receiver that can threaten the defense on all three levels. He's definitely a big-time playmaker. His yards after the catch is phenomenal. Last year, he was 26th among all wide receivers in FBS. In 2023, he was also top 20 in missed tackles forced per attempt as well. And so there's a lot to like here with this profile. We saw him score a touchdown for the Browns. I get it. There's a lot to hate about the Browns as well, whether it's Deshaun Watson, whether it's Shedeur Sanders. The quarterback situation really worries me. But I do think Concepcion is somebody that you could definitely take a look at, and somebody that I think can have some really usable weeks once bye weeks get going. Now, lastly, listen, let's talk about Cyrus Allen. Everybody's been excited about Cyrus Allen, and he didn't do nothing to put that hype out in his first preseason action. And I get it. Every year we get a Chiefs player that's overhyped in preseason, whether it was Justin Ross or whether it's Deneric Prince and some of the other guys we've had along the way. Every year there seems to be a Chiefs player that kind of gets this hype but doesn't do anything with it. Now, I will say this. I have been really impressed with what I saw from that week one preseason game. If you look at the box score, it's not going to tell you the whole story when it comes to Cyrus Allen, but you can definitely see what the Chiefs are really like about him. There's been a ton of talk from Mahomes, from Andy Reid about how much that Patrick Mahomes already trusts him. And for a team that, where there's a lot of shakiness at wide receiver, I think there's a path here for him to get opportunities. Now, I wouldn't go overboard. I think he is perfectly fine as a later round pick, but honestly, I don't think he's going to be somebody that starts the season as somebody that's going to get like consistent targets, and you're probably going to end up dropping this guy. I think he is much more of a player to keep in the back of your mind, monitor to see how things going. And if something were to happen to one of these other wide receivers like Rashee Rice or Xavier Worthy, then I think he would definitely slot in and be one of these guys, because he is by far one of their best man beaters that they have, where we know that Rashee Rice is much more of a zone threat, where they don't really have anybody that can get separation on their own. And Cyrus Allen definitely has that. And there's a lot of people that I really respect in this industry that really look at wide receivers like Matt Harmon, who really love Cyrus Allen and liked him heading into this year. And so I do think that there is a path here for fifth round wide receiver Cyrus Allen to carve himself out a role. I just don't think it's going to be the start of I think it's going to be much more in the second half of the season, which is much more what Andy Reid does with rookie wide receivers anyway. So anyways, let me know in the comment section below, who is your favorite wide receiver to target right now that you think is being undervalued? And if you have any questions for your upcoming fantasy drafts, be sure to drop them in the comment section below. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.